Okay, so we are up to part 3. Okay, so a quick review of what we did until now. And we'll use a summary sheet. So we're speaking about this week is called Shabbos Hagadol, the great Shabbos, because of the great miracle that occurred. It was on the 10th of Nisan. It was on Shabbos when God told the Jewish people to take the lamb and to prepare it for the for the Pesach sacrifice. That's going to be in 4 days. When the Egyptians heard about this, and they heard why, because they're going to be killed on that night, so then they battled against Pharaoh. They waged war, a civil war. They waged war to try to compel Pharaoh to free the Jewish people. But it didn't work. But because of this great miracle that the Egyptians themselves, that's what we call it Shabbos Hagadol. So the question is, why is it a miracle at all? And why is it a great miracle? It didn't even help the Jews. We still were stuck in Egypt. It didn't work. Second of all, why are we commemorating this on differently than every other type of holiday? We're commemorating this based on the day of the week, as opposed to the day of the month. And even though the technical reason is because they couldn't establish on the 10th of Nisan, because that was already declared as a fast day, or in the future was declared as a fast day, because that's when Miriam passed away. From a spiritual perspective, we still don't understand why they're deviating from the whole general way of the day of the month to the day of the week, just for a technical reason. So we started the explanation that the definition of a miracle is a change of nature. And here we have a change of the nature, the spiritual nature of the Egyptians. The Egyptians were the exact opposite of holiness. They were the epitome of unholiness, and they were the ones that didn't recognize God and didn't want to get the Jews go. And here we have the firstborns of Egypt, representing the strength of Egypt, fighting on behalf of the Jewish people. And that's the personification of the idea of the transformation of darkness to light. From the darkness itself, it's becoming light, and it's fighting on behalf of the Jewish people, even though they were obviously fighting for their own life from the natural standpoint. From a spiritual standpoint, though, this idea that from Egypt themselves, which is the exact opposite of holiness, could fight for holiness, that's a tremendous miracle that we don't have by any other holiday. All other holidays is all about the fact that God saved us. So God made a miracle and the Jews won the war. But it wasn't that the enemy themselves fought against themselves. So that's why this is a great miracle that we don't have by any other holiday. And we increased this explanation yesterday by explaining that the whole idea, the spiritual idea of the sparks, refining the sparks. Usually when we go, we're only able to elevate and refine the sparks that are in the world at large, but are not embedded within unholiness. This is called klipas noga. We're only able to go and elevate those sparks that are not bad and not good, but when we use them out for good, we're able to go and elevate it. But things that are embedded within unholiness, called the 3 klipos of Tamea, 3 shalosh klipos hatameas, the 3 impure klipos, those, the only solution for us is to just destroy it and to reject it. We cannot elevate it. But here we have from the impurity themselves, from Egypt themselves, these sparks, they'll be fighting behalf of the Jewish people. That goes against their whole spiritual nature. And that's why this is a great miracle. Okay, so we're holding now on chapter 4. So we still have to answer the second question. So based on the above, we can say that the 2 events that transpired on the 10th of Nisan, which are Egypt being smitten by the firstborn and the death of Miriam, are related. The Talmud teaches, why was the Torah portion that describes the death of Miriam juxtaposed to the portion dealing with the red heifer? In the Torah, first it tells us about the death of Miriam. Immediately afterwards, it tells us about the red heifer. Why is that? There must be some connection. So the Talmud explains. To tell you, just as the red heifer atones for sin, so too the death of the righteous atones for sin. So both the red heifer and the death of the righteous atone for sin. And this is explained in Tanya, in the portion, the 4th portion of Tanya, Igeras HaKodesh. The ashes of the red heifer purify the defilement by a corpse, even though this is the greatest degree of impurity, and it is rooted in a level much lower than noga. So let me explain what this means. In general, if someone commits a sin, they need to bring a sin offering, and the sin offering will go and atone for their sin. Okay, if it was a negative sin, if it was a positive commandment that they missed out on, then they bring a ola, which is a scent offering, and the scent offering will atone for that sin. So in general, a person's able to go and atone for sins that they've committed. um, but the and but in order to bring those offerings, you have to be pure. Now, the levels of purity, the lowest level, the worst level, the most severe level of impurity is actual dead body, a corpse. For a corpse, for most other types of impurities, just going to the mikvah is fine. Certain other ones, certain rituals not needed to be done in addition to the mikvah. But for a corpse, the only way to become pure for a corpse is a whole process of 7 days. You have to be sprinkled on with the waters that are mixed together with the ashes of the red heifer on 2 of those days, and go to the mikvah, and then finally you're able to become pure. So the red heifer is the only thing that's able to purify someone who became impure by a corpse. So the effect of the red heifer is similar to the death of the righteous, for it affects salvations in the midst of the earth to atone for the sin of the generation, even for the deliberate sins which are lower than noga. So in general, a sin offering can only go, and it's mainly for if you did a mistake, then you're able to bring a sin offering. Actually, I'm not sure about that. I have to check that up about the sin offering. I don't want to say something incorrect, so I'll take that back. But in general, the red heifer is able to go and atone for even something more than a regular sin offering could do, and the reason for that is because it's able to reach down. Good morning, Jack. It's able to reach down into the depths of impurity and atone for that. It's able to atone even for someone who's defiled by a corpse, which is the most severe type of impurity the red heifer is able to atone for. So similarly, the death of the righteous is also able to atone for even the most severe types of sins, and that's why it's put in the Torah written next to the red heifer, because both of them are able to atone for and purify even the most impure and even the most severe types of sins. So based on that, so that's the connection between those two events that happened. On the 10th of Nisan, Miriam, a righteous woman, passed away, and that atones for sins. And then we have the idea of the firstborn. So what's the Egypt being smitten by the firstborn? Based on the explanation above, the power of the Egyptian klipa fought forcefully for the release of the Jewish people to fulfill Hashem's command. This is similar to Miriam's death, the death of the righteous, which has the power to transform darkness to light and to atone even for the deliberate sins which are of the 3 impure klipas. So now we just finished explaining the connection between these two events. The two events that happen on this Shabbos, you have the death of Miriam, and you have the firstborn fighting a war against Pharaoh. Both are the similar idea. Both are that from the impurity themselves, from the most lowest levels, they're being transformed to light. They're being elevated. The death of the firstborn is able to atone for even these worst types of sins from these 3 impure klipos that were even deliberate. And so too, on the 10th of Nisan, you have the Egyptians themselves, the firstborn of the Egyptians, which embody the whole idea of these 3 impure klipos, this most impure level, and they're now fighting on behalf of the Jewish people. They're being elevated to holiness, and they're fighting on behalf of the Jewish people. And that is the connection between these two events. and that's similar to also to the red heifer, which is able to purify even from the most severe type of impurity from a corpse. So based on this basis, we can now explain why the 10th of Nisan was not established to commemorate Egypt being smitten by the firstborn as a result of Miriam's death. Now we can answer our second question. Our second question was, why, even though it's a technical reason there was a fast day on the 10th of Nisan, from a spiritual perspective, we still need to understand why is it that this idea, this commemoration is able to be of the firstborn fighting against Egypt is able to be pushed off by Miriam's death, and to pushed off and switched to such a way that it goes by the day of the week as opposed to the day of the month. So that was the second question. So based on what we just said, we can now answer that question. When Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, the shofar is not blown due to the decree of Rabbah. Rabbah made a decree lest the shofar be inadvertently carried 4 cubits in the public domain. So that's the reason why we don't blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. We're prefacing now over here with a different concept that based on this other concept, it's going to help us explain this. So on Rosh Hashanah, we don't blow the shofar on Shabbos. Why is that? Even though it's a mitzvah in the Torah, Rabbah, one of the Talmudic sages, made a decree. Someone might, if we allow people to blow shofars on Shabbos, not everybody knows how to blow the shofar. Someone might end up walking in the public domain to go to the rabbi to ask him questions that he has about blowing the shofar, and he's going to desecrate Shabbos. So because of that worry, no shofars on Shabbos. Now everybody asks, do we have a positive mitzvah in the Torah, a biblical commandment to blow the shofar? How can we just push it off so easily because of a worry that somebody might not realize how to blow the shofar and it might carry and desecrate Shabbos? Because of that worry, we're going to go and push off a biblical commandment. That's, so in Chassidus, there's an explanation for that. The Alter Rebbe asks, why does the sages deem it appropriate to uproot the biblical mitzvah of shofar for the reason expressed in the decree of Rabbah? How could the sages deny, he's using the language of Chassidus over here, how could the sages deny the observance of this mitzvah from many righteous, great, and good people on account of there might be someone unlearned or frivolous person who are the only individuals who would conceivably carry on Shabbos? He's unlearned, he doesn't realize, he doesn't know, because we're worried that somebody that's unlearned might go and decide and not realize to go and he might carry on Shabbos. We're going to abolish this whole mitzvah from everyone, from even those great and righteous people that, of course, we're not worried about them at all about carrying on Shabbos, but we're going to abolish this mitzvah across the board. How can we do that? So the explanation, the Hasidic explanation, the inner explanation for this decree isn't just a technical worry that we're worried someone might carry it on Shabbos. The inner explanation is refraining from blowing the shofar on Shabbos is not an abrogation of the mitzvah. Rather, on Shabbos, there is no need to blow the shofar because the divine influence drawn down by the shofar blowing is accomplished by the Shabbos day itself without the need to actually blow the shofar. So the reason why Rabbah was able to go and make such a decree and push off the mitzvah of shofar for a small little reason, seemingly, of someone might end up carrying, is because there's no need for the mitzvah in the first place on Shabbos. The spiritual accomplishment, whatever shofar generally accomplishes, Shabbos accomplishes that too by itself. And therefore on Shabbos, you don't need to blow the shofar. It's explained, by the way, that in the temple, they still blew the shofar, because in the temple on Shabbos, because in the temple, the shofar blowing was on a higher spiritual level than Shabbos, that Shabbos wouldn't be able to do by itself, so still has to blow the shofar. But anyways, over here we see the point, when we don't do something in Judaism, we're not losing out on it. It's because we don't need it right now. For whatever spiritual reason there is, it explains in Chassidus at length the whole reason how Shabbos accomplishes what shofar accomplishes. But the point is that we don't need it. That's why we don't have to do it. So the same applies over here. This same principle that when we don't do something, it's not because we're just pushing it off because something else supersedes it. It's because we don't need it. That's the reason. So the same thing applies over here regarding the commemoration of the miracle of Egypt being smitten by the firstborn and the death of Miriam. So the fact that we're pushing off the commemoration of the firstborn because of the fast day, because of the death of Miriam, isn't just because there's a technical reason. Okay, there's a fast day, now we got to push this off. No, the fast day of Miriam actually is the commemoration for the Egyptian being smitten by the firstborn. And that's what we're going to say now. On the day of Miriam's death, there is no need to commemorate the miracle, because whatever would be achieved by the commemoration of Egypt being smitten by the firstborn, by observing the customs of Shabbos Hagadol, this idea, which is the idea of the miracle of transforming darkness into light, this is instead achieved by commemorating Miriam's death, by fasting. So that when someone was observing the fast day of Miriam's death, that accomplishes the same thing as the 10th of Nisan of the firstborn smiting the Egyptians, as we just finished explaining, because just like the death of Miriam, the death of the righteous is able to atone for even the lowliest sins, and that's the idea of transforming even the most impure levels and bringing that up and elevating that, refining that, bringing that to light. So too, we have the similar idea with regarding the firstborn Egyptians smiting the Egyptians, is because even the firstborn of Egypt, the might of the impurity themselves, is being transformed to light and fighting on behalf of the Jews. So it's a similar idea. So you're able to accomplish this idea by fasting on Miriam's death, and that's why you don't need to. That's why we're able to push it off for this technicality and say, okay, so now we're going to push it off. Let's put it on the Shabbos beforehand instead of the 10th of Nisan, so that way it's never going to fall out on the 10th of Nisan. Why are we doing this? Because we don't need to commemorate it on the 10th of Nisan. So that is the explanation. Now, I have a question on this. What do we do nowadays? Nowadays, we don't fast on the 10th of Nisan anymore. So we're missing out. We're not going to be fasting, and we're not going to be doing the customs of the fasting for Miriam, and we're not going to be observing the Shabbos Hagadol. So I don't know. Maybe we're able to accomplish this by nowadays even without fasting and observing the Miriam's death. And I don't know. But I'll stop the recording here. We'll finish off the talk. It looks like we just have one more chapter, so we can finish that off tomorrow, God willing. We'll figure something else to do for